Hi, I'd like to share some thoughts with you about the situation, and I'm coming to discuss this also as a father of soldiers. I have three sons. My oldest son is a volunteer ambulance driver, and he has been involved, especially around in October, going down to the south and helping people and bringing them to hospitals. My second son was a mefaked in Tzayer Givati, and he left the army last summer, so it was before October 7th, but he's working now with security forces. His friends were all called to Miluyim. He wasn't, because he already started working with security forces, and he's also been down to the south, and he's been to Gaza in various capacities. And my third son works in intelligence, and he's obviously busy with things from that perspective. All of them, sadly, have had friends who both fought and who were hurt or who were killed in the fighting since the war started. So we hear about these events kind of on a first-hand basis. But I want to share some thoughts with you, and I'm pretty sure these ideas have been said before, but everyone has their own take on it. Often when my friends and my family call from America or inquire and they say, "How are you?" So my answer is always the same. It's always, "Well, I'm fine," or "My family's fine, thank God." But there's always the but. And the but is, we're not really fine because friends of my kids are fighting, because there are soldiers fighting in general, whether we know them, whether we don't know them, because there are still hostages, because there's a threat of war in the north. And I think it's really important to realize that, to remember all the times. I feel that I'm constantly being remembered by that it's not an individual problem. It's not an individual thing. It's that we could be fine, but my neighbors are not fine, and I can't feel completely fine from that. And everybody has pointed out how much the war has united the Jewish people. But I think also, as a religious person, the sense that I can't pray just for my own kids anymore. I have to pray for all the soldiers, and I have to pray for all the hostages, and I have to pray for all the people who are suffering, and it's no longer just me. Obviously, we know that that's the ideal. We all know the story about Ari Levine, when he went to the doctor with his wife, and he said, "My wife's foot hurts us." It's a famous story, right? It was somebody who's so empathetic with another person. There was a famous Talmudic scholar named Shimon Shkup in the beginning of the 20th century, and he wrote a book of his Chidushim on the Talmud, but in the introduction, he says a very beautiful thing. He says it's something not related to the Talmud, just his own insight. He says that a very low person, if you ask them who they are, who are they? They're their body. They feel most associated with their physical side. He says if they advance spiritually a little bit, so then they feel more integrated. They're their body, they're their emotions, their intellect. He said, but really, he said, the more a person develops spiritually, ethically, the more they identify themselves not just with themselves, but suddenly when they say I, the I means their family unit, right? Or when they say I, it could mean their neighborhood or their town. And he says at the highest levels, when the person says I, how do I feel? The I is the whole world, right? Everybody, all the Jews and maybe beyond the Jews. And so that's a very high level, obviously. I mean, maybe tzaddikim reach that level. But, and the Baal Shem Tov, for instance, the Baal Shem Tov also talks about this. He says that a person should always pray for the largest possible context. In other words, if you could pray for something more than yourself and see yourself as part of that larger context, then it's a higher form of prayer. So if I pray not just for my kids, but for all kids, right? Or if I pray not just for the Jewish people, but even that there should be peace in the whole world. So then my prayer is not localized. It's prayer for the whole, and those prayers are always more selfless. Now the Baal Shem Tov says, honestly, he says, if you're in pain, then you have to pray for yourself. You can't lie. You have to be honest. You have to pray for yourself. But to the degree that you can include yourself within a larger prayer, That's really important, and we know that every prayer is somehow answered some way, even if we don't see it. There's a story of a famous Breslover Rav in the 19th century. Forgot which of the Breslovers he was, but his son has been drafted to the Russian army, and he writes his son a letter saying, "Don't tell me when you're going to be released, because it would be a pity to waste all the good prayers that I'm praying for you." In other words, he understood that I'm praying for you personally, but I don't want to stop praying. And I don't want to stop praying with emotion and feeling. So don't tell me you'll be released, but those prayers will go someplace else because we're all a whole. There was a recent contemporary teacher of Kabbalah named Chaim Cohn, and he was known as the Chalban, the milkman. He lived in Tel Aviv. He was a milkman, and he lived in Tel Aviv. And a number of really good books of his Sforim have come out from his teachings. And in one of them, he says that the definition of a living organism is that all the pieces work together and stay together. And the definition of something that dies is that it starts to disintegrate and the pieces fall apart. So he talks about how important it is to be part of a living organism and not just to think about ourselves as individual pieces, but as parts of a greater whole. What he doesn't say, but which is also true, is that a living organism, when you poke the finger, it hurts. The whole body hurts. When you stub the toe, the whole body hurts, and that's a price we pay from being part of a whole. And so I think that what we all feel for our own family, for our own kids, and for their friends, and for their units, and for all Klal Yisrael is a sign of wholeness and a sign of what it means to be integrated as part of the Jewish people. And we should just keep that in mind in all of our prayers, and just, to the degree that we can, pray for as wide a context as we can, as long as it's sincere. And those type of prayers Hashem doesn't reject, Anyway, I wish you a lot of blessing, and your children will come home safely, and the hostages should come home safely, and we should see the end of the war and of all wars.